just record the session, just accept it on your side. All right, so good morning and welcome to another webinar of TVDM Consultants. This morning we are co-hosting with Willie Roos and Daniela Warner of Stratafin. Willie Roos needs no introduction to those of you that join us regularly, and for those of you that are on the sectional title Living in South Africa Facebook group, he is one of the most active people on that group and one of the most active people in the industry as well. I'll let Daniela and Willie introduce their services a little bit during the course of the presentation, but just a couple of admin points from our side. Our team will be muting you if there is some background noise. They will assist you with any of your questions in the chat function, and they'll be admitting anybody that has dropped off or anybody that wishes to join us. We had a nice record of almost 500 registrations, and I see we're making our way to 200 attendees this morning, which is really, really great. So I'm very, very thankful for everybody taking up their time this morning to join us. Just a couple of admin points. The session is recorded. It's going to be placed on our website. It will also be shared by Stratafin as well. Those of you that have not yet signed up to our newsletter, please take a look in the chat function. One of the team members will be sharing the newsletter link for you to sign up. The importance of the newsletter, if you don't care too much about the articles, is to actually be able to sign up to future webinars. And then Nicole has kindly reminded me that although that I've mentioned the young gentleman in question, I haven't introduced him formally. Kyle is the newest team member. He has joined us from a marketing background. I refer to him as the baby Daniela or the junior Daniela, and I hope that he is able to add to our team even a fraction of what Daniela adds to the Stratafin team. We've got lots of exciting projects and adventures in our future, and Carl's going to be instrumental in that. So very welcome to you, Carl. I hope that you're with us for a very long time into the future.
Thanks.
All right, so I won't put you on the spot there at all, Kyle. With no further ado, I'm going to hand over to Willie. The topic of discussion today is the relationship between owners, trustees, and the managing agent. I think this is quite a hot topic. We see very often in our consulting practices, a lot of this type of question arising is, what is the responsibility of the body corporate? What is the responsibility of the trustees? Who is the body corporate? Who is the trustees? More importantly, what is the responsibility of the managing agent? We pay the managing agent. Shouldn't they do all of this for us? So I think we're going to talk this morning about all those elements, and I'm sure that each one of you have a role to play in any one of these areas. And Willie, I'm sure that the information is going to be very worthwhile. So there's some information about Willie. Willie's practiced as a property attorney for over 20 years. He has been involved in sectional title management for over 8 years. He started Stratafin in 2014 with the goal of assisting community schemes with responsible solution for funding without catching them out in a debt trap, which we very often hear about. Willie, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Zerlinda. Thanks for the opportunity. I want to start out by saying that we're going to have a discussion about the role players. And from the first page, there are various role players that we've got on here, and we're not going to deal with all of them. So Zerlinda made mention of the fact that there's quite a few nice projects that we are busy working on. And one of those will be our trustees training that Stratafin, together with TVDM and with Dr. Karen Durham, is busy setting up. And the first module will be done, I think, in the first week of June. Zerlinda and Daniela, am I right?
Correct, yes.
Can you guys just mute Gil?
Okay,
thank you. So we will have our first trustees training then in that first week of or last week of May, first week of June, and it will deal with all the topics. There are 11 modules that we will run. It is gratis and verniet, so you guys would not have to pay for this. And Zerlinda, myself, and Dr. Karen Durham is giving you guys our time to try and train and get the industry to a higher level of knowledge in respect of the acts and the practices around sectional titles in sectional title schemes in general. All right, so regarding today's the discussion, and I said to Zerlinda, I would rather want to have it a more free discussion, and it comes out of a discussion on the sectional title living group, where people have frequently stated that the managing agent is acting in a certain manner, and that the trustees have authorized the manager or instructed the managing agent to act in a certain manner, and as owners they feel aggrieved by these actions, and sometimes the managing agent does not want to act in a certain manner and does not want to comply with certain instructions from the trustees because they feel that it is in contravention with legislation or the rules, and they then complain about that. So I've, over the past couple of months, started realizing that being a managing agent is very difficult, in that you sit between the devil and the deep blue sea. On the one hand, you've got the owners that are looking at you as an expert, or looking at you to do things in a correct manner and make sure that things are done in a correct manner. And on the other hand, you might have trustees that give you instructions, and those instructions might not always be completely in accordance with the act or the rules. And if you then resist doing so, then you risk your contract being terminated. If you do it, then from the owner's point of view, you are not looking after their interest, and you risk your contract being terminated. So you sit in a very, very precarious situation, and you need to manage that situation very carefully to go through all the pitfalls. So that's where this comes from, we then decided to have this discussion. So let's start with the developer. Obviously, that is the person who owns the land initially on which the sectional title scheme will be developed. And once the permissions have been obtained from the relevant authorities to do the scheme, the developer will then start drafting all the documentation through his attorneys, where the scheme will then come into existence once the units have been built and the first unit has been transferred. So on that first transfer of the first unit, the scheme comes into existence with that owner, that is the first owner of a section, and the developer that owns the balance at that stage of the development. So all the owners and all the owners of sections will become members and will remain a member of that scheme until such a time as the owner has sold his unit, a clearance certificate was obtained, and the registration of transfer has taken place in the deeds office to transfer that unit out of, or the section out of the owner's name. The question is, in respect of members, what are their roles and responsibilities in respect of the scheme? So in terms of section 3 and section 4 of the Act, the scheme has got certain rights, and as such, owners as part of the scheme have got those almost as part of the scheme has got those rights, and must make sure that those rights are complied with, and they must vote at AGMs and make decisions and give directions to the people that they then elect to become the body that will manage the scheme on their behalf. So that body that must manage the scheme on their behalf are the trustees, and as I just said, they are appointed at an AGM. At that AGM, one needs to determine how many trustees will be in the scheme, you need to then vote for those trustees, and they then get elected. They then choose a chairperson, and they will then start functioning in accordance with Section 7 of the Act, that says all these rights and obligations that a scheme has to fulfill now goes over to their shoulders, but in accordance with the directions and restrictions imposed by the owners on them as trustees. And I will come back a bit later on in respect of the restrictions imposed by owners on them, because I had a discussion, or I posted a post on the group where I made mention of a certain restriction which I think will assist managing agents and will assist owners and trustees to know that they are functioning in an environment where the one can't blame the other. So we'll come back to that restriction a bit later on.
Willie, I'm going to interrupt you for a second before
Sure.
we move on from the trustees. Just a couple of practical points, and perhaps we can stop for a bit of discussion here. You know, you're talking about the election of the trustees, the nomination of trustees. We were chatting to a colleague yesterday about, you know, the type of information that has to be presented to the members before, and we very often get requests from owners that those people that are wanting to make themselves available to be trustees submit a CV or stand up at the meeting to introduce themselves. And we often find that you either do not get trustee nominations prior to the meeting, or you get people only at the meeting making themselves available, or even less than what is required to be on the committee, and them having to co-opt people. So do you have any practical tips in how to get people to know each other, to nominate one another, to put themselves forward as nominees, to get that information out to the owners, perhaps a request prior for people to put their names in? I very often see on chairpersons' reports or trustees' reports where the trustees request that new people make themselves available, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of work that goes into it. So any helpful tips there to make people available?
Yeah, sure. Zerlinda, when I was managing schemes, we as the managing agents at that stage, we would work with the board of trustees, but we would set up different committees. So we had different committees that worked on the different aspects in the scheme. So we would have a security committee, a finance committee, and various other committees. And we would then bring people from out the scheme onto those committees to assist that trustee to manage that portfolio. And in that way, you start bringing other people into the management of this scheme, and you start training them, and you make sure that they have the requisite knowledge and expertise by the time they then become a trustee as well. So that was the way that we tried to get additional trustees or additional people to become involved in respect of schemes. But it's always a difficulty in schemes, especially with the fact that trustees now have a fiduciary duty and that they can be held responsible in respect of that fiduciary duty for damages suffered by the scheme. So I think people now, and we will touch on that as well, professional trustees, people now does not want to take that responsibility. Now that it's specifically stated that they have a fiduciary duty and that they can be held responsible, and then they don't get paid for it. They have their full-time jobs, they don't get paid for what they're doing, and they have a responsibility to the scheme, and they can be held liable if they don't act in a fiduciary manner and causes damages. So it is difficult, but we, through the committees, try to bring people on board and assist and grow them to become part of the scheme. You do not need to be an owner. That's also a question that we get a lot on the group. You do not need to be an owner to be a trustee. So it is always important then to also look for outside people that can act as trustees and that have the requisite knowledge to assist. I know that Zerlinda does that. She acts as a professional trustee, and she would then be able to give advice under those circumstances to owners and the other trustees how to act and what the legal position is regarding those things. So look at people from the outside as well to appoint as trustees. So the trustees are the physical functionaries of the body corporate. And because the body corporate is a legal person and cannot act on its own, so it does need the people. So we need to get those people to actually stand and be part of that. The trustees are the executive and the administrative organ of the body corporate. So at the end of the day, the trustees are the people that make the final decisions, how things are run and what needs to be reasonably done to comply with the legislation and with the rules. But they do so based on the authority that was given to them and the restrictions that have been imposed on them by owners. And one of those restrictions, obviously, is the budget. So trustees must make sure that they act within the budget. And they cannot act if the action that they are taking is not budgeted for and there is no money to pay for that, because then they are acting outside of their authority. So an interesting question that comes out of that is, do we have to look at the bottom line of the budget, or must we look at every specific entry in the budget? Now, there are various opinions in this regard. I know that Prof. Paddock specifically feels that if the budget does not have a specific action or a line that says legal actions, legal fees, and you've got an amount of 300,000 Rand, then you cannot take legal action because it was not budgeted for. There are another school of thought that says as long as you manage the budget and you can utilize money from one portion of the budget into the other portion and you remain within the budget, that your action is still legitimate. I believe that the line item should be there, but if the amount is incorrect, then you can utilize money from other portions of the budget in respect of that line item, because you have discussed it as owners and you have given authority. And a budget is merely what it is, a budget. It is not an actual, so you have estimated. And as such, if your estimation is wrong, then if the trustees can utilize money from one portion to the other portion, they can then act, and that would be sufficient. But as I said, there are various opinions in this regard. And my opinion is merely based on the fact that it's a budget, it's not an actual. So you can't necessarily know exactly what needs to be spent. As I said, the trustees stand in a fiduciary relationship. That means that they must act to the benefit of the owners. So at all times, they must act in a way where the owners put their trust and their confidence and reliance on them to act in their best interest. So they must ensure that their actions are done in that way. The managing agents, in terms of section 4, if I remember correctly, 4A, have the right to appoint the managing agent. So that is where the conflict or the perceived conflict comes from, because the managing agents have been appointed by the trustees. They then feel that they have to act as when and how the trustees tell them to act. And in certain instances, for example, one that we see a lot of is where legal fees are loaded onto an account prior to taxation. And then the managing agent says, well, that is the instruction from the trustees to do so. And if I don't do it, they will terminate my contract. So they get in a situation where they know that the rule says that the fee must be agreed or taxed, but they place it on the account or in any event prior to taxation or prior to an agreement, because if they don't do so, their services will be terminated. So that is one of those typical situations that managing agents face and have problems with, and that they need to manage. So we then get to the position of the managing agent, and the question is, what is the relationship of the managing agent with the body corporate? And Zerlinda, I'm going to draw you in here because there's a lot of points that we can discuss in this regard. But I think it starts out in terms of the old act, where it specifically said that it is a relationship of master and servant. And master and servant is an archaic way of saying it's an employer-employee relationship. And that was seen in terms of the old act, or perceived to be seen in the old act as the relationship between the body corporate and the managing agent. A servant performs duties under the direction and the control of the master. So it is subject to the master's knowledge and to the master's consent. So therefore, the body corporate as the master determines what the managing agent do and must do in accordance with the contract between them. The question arises that can a managing agency, which is normally a legal person, actually be an employee? Because in terms of our law, an employee can only be a natural person. An employer can be a company, but an employee can't be a company, because a company does not have hands and feet. It's got people that have hands and feet, and as such, it can't in its own right be an employee. So it becomes a very tricky issue to determine if that relationship is actually a master and servant relationship, or an employer-employee relationship, or is it maybe, as the name suggests, an agency? It's a managing agent. And I think I will bring Zerlinda in here, because you specifically said to us when we were having a discussion earlier on what Prof. Paddock's view is regarding agents, and he's absolutely correct in that regard.
Yeah, 100%. So we've got a comment on the chat function, or a question by Clive: is master-slave relationship defined or mentioned in current legislation? Was master-servant, Clive, not master-slave. But I think a lot of body corporates still see managing agents that way, is that they are the master and the managing agent is the servant, or as Clive puts it, Freudian slip, the slave there. I don't believe that the employee relationship even comes into task there as well, because if you look at the test of employee and what an employee is, and the tools of the trade and the control and type of things like that, managing agents don't fit into that category. As you mentioned, when Nicole Tavares and I were at Paddock's, Prof. Paddock always used to speak about the law of agency, and how the Sectional Title Schemes Management Act now speaks to the trustees' powers to appoint employees and agents, as you mentioned earlier, Willie. And that agent and agency is important in that the managing agent steps into the shoes of the trustees in many instances. In the legislation, the Sectional Titles Act and the Sectional Title Schemes Management Act, basically one of the only things that the managing agent could do or can do without coming to the trustees is issue a levy clearance certificate, unless the trustees instruct the managing agent different. Whereas the functions of the trustees can be delegated to the managing agent, and you're going to talk about that delegation of authority. And when else do you delegate functions and authority is to agents. either as a power of attorney, or if you had to sign a mandate delegating that authority. For example, if you were selling your home, you would give a mandate to an estate agent. And this is no different in the relationship between the body corporate represented by the trustees and a managing agent, is that that agent has those powers of the trustees. Very often it is defined by the management agreement, and when it's not defined by the management agreement, it has to be defined by the members as part of directives at the annual general meeting you spoke about, or by the trustees. And maybe a good time to deal with it is at the appointment and negotiation of the management agreement. Alternatively, when the trustees change each year at the annual general meeting, that first trustee meeting, for the managing agent to sit down with the trustees and say, right, in terms of the agreement, we can do X, Y, and Z, but as your agents, we can also do A, B, C without having to come back to you for approval in all instances. And one of the things you mentioned earlier was maybe paying the municipals. You can't exactly go to the trustees every single month and say, sir, madam, can I please pay for the water? Otherwise, it's going to be cut off. I mean, those are things that you simply have to do. Or can we please pay the employees of the body corporate salaries? Even the fact that managing agents sometimes have the responsibility of dealing with payroll indicates that they're not employees, but rather at the same level as the trustees, as their agents, stepping into their shoes. So that's our opinion, at least, as well, that is shared by Prof. Paddock, of the agency element of managing agents.
Sure. And that is exactly where the problem arises, because an agent has authority to act in an employer's place. So it acts as an independent party, and it uses its own methods to perform the duties that is tasked with, and its own methodology, and does not have to prescribe to the employer's methodology. And it's not subject to the control of the master or of the employer. And that is where the problem then arises, because you have a situation that if you have a clear agency agreement, then the managing agent can actually do anything that the trustees can do. And we know that the trustees can delegate certain tasks, but at the end of the day, they cannot delegate the liability at the end to make sure that these tasks have been done correctly. And therefore, an agency is also not really the creature that we are dealing with here. So it's a very, very difficult one. What are we dealing here with? If you look at an agency as a creature like you have now described, and Prof. Paddock believes that that is what the relationship is, I believe that that is the position in respect of an executive managing agent. So an executive managing agent is an agent in law. That is a real agent in law, and I think we can go have a look at that later on. I think it's Management Rule 28 that deals with that, but that creates a real agency. So we do see that your master and servant, or your agency agreement, or whatever you want to call this agreement, does have the express terms of the contract that says what needs to be done. So from that point of view, it is again the managing the body corporate that tells the managing agent how and what should be done, and that is then a contractual relationship. Then you've also touched something else. Maybe one needs to look at a delegation agreement where certain tasks are delegated to the managing agency under certain circumstances or conditions, and then deal with those in a delegation agreement. Or alternatively, a contract for professional services. So I believe that that's where we as an industry should go towards, is to employ a managing agency under a contract for professional services. The only difficulty with a contract for professional services is that when you employ somebody with professional services, like an attorney or a doctor or a brain surgeon, that person needs to have the requisite knowledge. And what a contract of professional services does, it creates a fiduciary relationship between the body corporate and the person that then stands in that contract of professional services. So that can only take place once the managing agent does have the requisite knowledge to apply in all circumstances. Otherwise, they will also be in a situation where they give advice and it's not necessarily correct, and they will then be held liable in terms of that contract because the services that they gave does not comply and damages were suffered. So it is a very strange type of relationship that we sit with. It is not really an employer-employee, master and servant as we would have thought the traditional one would be. It is not really a complete agency because at the end of the day, the trustees still have the ultimate responsibility and can say, no, you can't do so. It is not a delegation agreement as yet, and nor is it a professional services agreement. So strange beast that we're dealing here with, and I think that is what is creating the problem in the industry, and we need to define this properly. And I mean, the discussion that we had was that CISOS was going to define this. So tell us about that.
Don't get me started on the CISOS. So when the legislation was prepared, the issue of managing agent was still very much up in the air. That a managing agent was seen as the ugly cousin or stepchild or whatever it might be, whatever the saying you choose to use, of estate agents under the Estate Agency Affairs Act. Hopefully that position of managing agent has somehow cleared up under the Property Practitioners Act, although there's a lot of questions under that as well. But the Community Scheme Ombuds Service was going to, in its legislation, have a code of conduct for managing agents, and as part of that code of conduct, and I hear it was going to be quite a whopper of a document. It was going to, set out what a managing agent is, what the relationship is, regulate the relationship, maybe even, and I see some questions coming in about management agreements, maybe even having a template style management agreement. And I don't think that there's anything template style really. When we do rules, a lot of our clients say, oh, just send us the template, but each scheme is very unique because it's filled with people and people are unique. So there's no template. So there shouldn't be a template for a management agreement either. And there's also there's differences in the service level agreements between managing agents. If I remember correctly, at the Cape Town CISOS event, Jolene, amongst other templates, was going to put out a template management agreement for managing agents as well for body corporates and homeowners associations, which I think is dangerous, but it's the CISOS efforts to see if they can assist in the regulation and governance of managing agents in this relationship. But although that code of conduct is mentioned, it is not incorporated into the legislation. It is, however, on the to-do list of the CISOS to regulate managing agents and executive managing agents. I just hope that it's regulation in a positive light and not over-regulation or getting it hopelessly wrong, because there's enough of us out there that's getting it hopelessly wrong at the moment. We don't still need help in that regard.
Yeah. I saw that there was a question about a professional trustee. It is something that we want to discuss. You fulfill the role as a professional trustee in many instances. Can you maybe just give us a bit of light on that? What do you do, and how are you appointed?
Okay, so interestingly, although the role of professional trustee has been around for many, many years, it has only really been with the introduction of an executive managing agent that the desire for a professional trustee has increased. And with that, obviously, the change in the legislation, I think a lot of self-managed schemes that did not have managing agents believe that they did not need any type of external assistance. So it's really only with the changing legislation, the introduction of an executive managing agent, that professional trustees have gotten a bit popular. So to be appointed as a professional trustee, because you're an outsider to the scheme, or you don't have to be an outsider to the scheme to be a professional trustee, you can be an owner. But if you were going to be appointed as an owner, trustee or professional trustee, you would have to be, your payment would need to be approved by a special resolution. Whereas if you're a non-member of a body corporate and serving as a professional trustee, your payment is approved by an ordinary resolution of the members items which is included in the budget, so done at the annual general meeting. Alternatively, there must be a budget item for it and no financial restriction of expenditure on the budget. So when we offer the service of professional trustee, we do have a committee of trustees that we work with, not normally a very big one, maybe it's 2 or 3 other trustees, bearing in mind you must at least have 2 trustees. So we can also offer 2 professional trustees or work with anybody else in the industry that offers that service. We prefer to be appointed as the chairperson, and we generally are appointed as the chairperson, not because the chairperson has any more power than anybody else, but simply because that role of chairperson is very often seen as being the one that is ultimately responsible for everything and gets the bullets shot at them. So that's something that we prefer to take on ourselves, and that way at least take a bit of pressure off the trustees. I personally don't offer the service of professional trustee in a body corporate that does not have a managing agent, because very often the role of professional trustee and managing agent is also confused. And I'm also not a signatory to the body corporate's bank account, because we should only be needed for a particular period of time. 1 or 2 body corporates, we do get appointed year after year after year because nobody else is wanting to do it, but I prefer not to be a signatory on the account. The body corporate's insurance policy has to note that there's a professional trustee, and we have got our own insurance in place for the role of professional trustee as well. We have to be included in all of the email correspondences backwards and forwards, number one, because we need to know what is going on. We need to step in when needed to give advice, and because we're going to be held just as personally liable as any one of the other trustees if something does go wrong. But we try not to waste the body corporate's time and resources in, appointing a contractor or approving an invoice for payment or dealing with a couple of nitty-gritty things, but it depends on body corporate to body corporates. And then, of course, when it comes to portfolios, we, as you mentioned, Willie, we definitely do recommend portfolios. And then, of course, we hold the legal portfolio. I try to stay away from financial management as best as I can. We leave that to the experts such as yourself. But where the trustees don't have a certain skill set, we are able to, through our colleagues in the industry, offer them those services. So that's a little bit about a professional trustee. I don't know how the other guys are doing it. There's not many people that open themselves up to be professional trustees. I know Lee Maingard of L&M Services offer the service as well. I'm not too sure if he's online this morning. But yeah, it's an interesting role to have. And it's great to see the positivity, or the positive impact rather, that a position like that can have in a body corporate that needs it.
Pearla's asked the question if CSOS has jurisdiction over you as a professional trustee. I think the answer is, you can answer.
I'm not too sure what Pearl means by the question of jurisdiction over, but we are held just as liable as any other trustee.
Absolutely.
And we can be cited to any type of CSOS application. And interestingly, it's normally when there is a CSOS application that my door gets knocked on to say, can you please become a professional trustee to assist us? And, then we very often, when we're responding to a CSOS application, then get the other side saying, oh no, Zelinda can't respond, blah, 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 but I'm a trustee and the legal portfolio is my responsibility. And this is exactly, what falls under that portfolio. So yes, the CSOS does have jurisdiction over professional trustees. Don't give them any ideas, Paul. Maybe they start regulating professional trustees as well. Although maybe that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, I can also just think from a liability point of view that one would, if you want to act as a professional trustee, make sure that you've got the necessary insurance in place to cover yourself for any eventuality, if you will be held liable for any action. Because if you in a number of bodies corporate, then that can create quite a hectic liability for you. So yeah, what is the situation regarding insurance in that regard?
Is Mike Addison online?
I don't think Mike's on.
So Nicole's actually recently done some research with us. We've had to go through our process of insurance renewals and things like that. We're actually with Adsher and with Mike Addison. And Nicole's reminding me that we need to make sure that the body corporate has the necessary insurance cover in place and that we are noted on the insurance policy. Mike, you're online. Do you want to jump in here? Just unmute yourself wherever you are.
Every webinar you put poor Mike on the spot.
I do.
See, I have to concentrate, otherwise you catch me.
Morning, Mike.
Morning, everybody. I see a lot of our friends here again today. So the insurance aspects are pretty important, sometimes tricky. The PI cover is what you essentially looking
Absolutely.
at. And so any person that's a professional dispensing any sort of advice or being put in a paralegal position or a paralegal advising position, which I always say a managing agent specifically is in a paralegal advising position, should see to it that they have got professional indemnity to protect themselves and essentially protecting their clients. Yes, executive managing agents would need to look at that, and a professional trustee, of course. And we used to always wonder, what about, the question often arises, what about the paid trustee, the trustee that gets paid by resolution to carry out the duties, because after all, sometimes trusteeship can be almost a full-time job for some people. You know, and over the years, again, I'm not going to mention names of various attorneys that I have spoken to, but there seems to be consensus that if you have a once-off situation where a trustee is being paid, then, you know, hopefully the insurance policy covers that paid trustee. So I would just look at that because some of the insurance policies that you have under trustees indemnity would cover such a paid trustee, and some of them not. So you just got to just be careful there. I also tend to overlook asking that question. Some of the policies would exclude a paid trustee or a professional trustee. Some insurers, in other words, would deem a one-off paid trustee as being a professional. My feeling is that, and it's not actually my opinion, because I only got that opinion from after speaking to various attorneys many years ago, actually, was that when a person is being a trustee here and a trustee there, not in the buildings that they're sort of looking after, but, you know, they're almost making a business of it, even though they might be looking after three, then you're starting to tread on different water, and you're a professional and you would need PR. Don't know if that answers the question.
No, perfect. Thanks, Mike.
Okay.
Yeah. Then just regarding executive managing agents, which is dealt with under Prescribed Management Rule 28. So if you have a look at the rule, it says that the scheme must be managed in a way that where there's a professional level of skill and care. So therefore, somebody that manages as an executive managing agent needs a professional level of skill and care, like we said in terms of the contract of professional services. Then that person is liable for any loss suffered by the body corporate as a result of not applying that skill and that care. The person has a fiduciary obligation towards every member of the body corporate. And then it's got all the physical things that needs to be done, arrange for the inspection of the common property every 6 months, must report every 4 months to the members, propose the repairs that needs to be made, and so forth. So then it deals with all the physical matters. But from a contractual point of view, an executive managing agent is actually in that position where we are saying, well, we as an industry should move towards where bodies corporate are managed by managing agents that have the necessary skill and expertise to actually advise the trustees and advise the owners. Because at the end of the day, if you have that relationship and you are being told to do something that is contrary to the law or the act, then it's very easy to say, sorry, I'm in this relationship where I have a professional obligation towards you, and as such, I cannot accept this instruction because this instruction is in contravention with rule ABC or whatever the rule is. And under those circumstances, your contract would not then be able to be terminated on the basis that you are not fulfilling the instructions given to you. So I think what the legislator has done by bringing the executive managing agent was in a way a manner to create a managing agent that has a fiduciary duty towards the scheme and does not necessarily only stand in an employer-employee relationship. And I think we need to slowly but surely move towards maybe a quasi fiduciary relationship where a managing agent has a quasi fiduciary relationship. And in that way, then make the position of the managing agent more secure to act in accordance with the Act and act then in a way that benefits the members and ultimately the trustees as well, and that there should not be seen a conflict of interest between the members and the trustees, because from the group, we actually get the idea sometimes, Zerlinda, or most of the times actually, that there's this fight between trustees and owners as to what trustees can do and what they can't do, and what instructions were given to the managing agents and so forth.
Yeah.
And I think that is a way of minimizing that.
On that note, Willie, you know, I just commented yesterday on that that sectional title living in South Africa group, and if anybody is not a part of it, I would really suggest that you do go and have a look at it. Sectional title living in SA, that it's just hit the 11,000 mark. And if you look at the membership of that group, it is mostly owners and trustees, and very often the managing agents, you know, pop their noses out and answer something, but they pull it back very quickly because they are under siege very often. And there's actually another group on Facebook. It's the Portfolio Managers Support Group, and that's where the managing agents go on. And there we have, you know, the rants and raves, and people are much more open. And it's a pity that when managing agents are in a position where they feel that they are not going to answer questions on the group or give their comments on the group because there's such a backlash on them, simply because of this misunderstanding of their role in the community scheme industry. Yeah. You know, it's unfortunate, but you know, they've got so much to offer. But as you said, it's that expertise, that qualifications that are very much needed. So we encourage, you know, anybody from owners, trustees, managing agents to take part in this online training that's going to be presented, that you mentioned as well, Willie. Willie, there were one or two questions on the group that I think is relevant for this purpose.
Yes.
Is what is the managing agent's function, role, responsibility? What should they do? What should they not do when they're telling the trustees what is right, but the trustees are ignoring it and doing something wrong? What is the managing agent supposed to do in that situation?
Well, currently, when they stand in a contract of master and servant, one would think that they should be obliged to perform in terms of that contract, but our law is also clear that a instruction that's contrary to the law cannot or can be legally ignored or not complied with on the basis that it's in breach with the law, and under those circumstances the contract cannot be terminated. However, we all know that the practical problem is that once you do that, they're going to look for a reason to dismiss you in any event. So one needs to manage that situation carefully and try and educate the trustees, I would think, and communicate with them and let them understand what the law is and what the requirements of the rules are, and try and nudge them in the right direction to act in the correct way. But in general, they would not be able to be terminated when they say we're not going to do it because it's contrary to the law. But yeah, it is a problem. And I was suggesting on the group that maybe the right to terminate must lie with owners only. So once the trustees appoint somebody, then in terms of section 7, a limitation must be placed on the trustees that they can't terminate the agreement, but in general, it can only be terminated during the currency of the agreement under a special resolution of owners. But to make sure that the trustees don't move to end that relationship when they're not happy, and that it needs to go back to owners to make their decision, because then the managing agent can actually say to the owners, but I have protected you in this way, and I've said no to this instruction, and that is why my contract needs to be terminated, or that's why the trustees want to terminate my contract. And in that way, they then get protected as well. So that is my suggestion in that regard.
Billy, we've got about 5 minutes left. I'm sorry, I always do this to you.
Sure, I've got pages and pages that I still wanted to discuss.
Nicole actually suggested that we do a follow-up, and I think that's a very good idea. So let's put that in the calendar for soon.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to still speak about the role of the chairman as well. I mean, you made mention of the fact that the chairman is a trustee and is just a normal trustee like anybody else. I think that needs to be understood as well, because sometimes chairmen think that they have other roles and obligations and rights. They don't. They chair a meeting, and if a decision can't be made because there's a splitting of votes, then they've got an additional vote. And that is in terms of our law, what their function is. And apart from that, they are just merely a normal trustee like all the other trustees as well. So that's just quickly to mention that, but there were quite a few other things that I wanted to mention. Daniela, there were also questions that we received. If we can just maybe deal with one more.
Absolutely. So the question was along the lines of, I'm just pulling it up here quickly on my phone. It doesn't want to load. It was from Mike at Annette Lang, and he asked that the trustees owe the city of Cape Town quite a bit of money. They wanted to take it out of the reserve fund, which he then went back and said, no, that's not right. They then said, well, either you take it out of the reserve fund, or we're going to fire you as managing agents, and we're going to do it anyway. So the question was, who polices the regulations?
Yeah, difficult one. I think that is just a typical scenario again of what we've been discussing this morning. At the end of the day, the policemen in a scheme are the owners. The owners are the people that have the authority, and that authority is then delegated to the trustees. And when trustees do not act in accordance with the budget and are acting in a way contrary to the rules, then the owners need to take control. And we see owners complain the whole time about things not being done correctly, but they do not make use of the mechanisms of the Act to actually call a special general meeting, to then dismiss trustees, to appoint new trustees, to do what is necessary to actually make sure that the scheme is run in accordance with the Act and with the rules. So at the end of the day, the owners are the policemen that must make sure that things are done properly. And I see there that Simon is saying that owners sometimes don't care. They don't care. But if they don't care, they must understand that the decisions made by trustees have an impact on their investment. I mean, we deal with many schemes that are under administration, and those schemes you can't even sell units in some of these schemes because of the state of the scheme that was caused by trustees in the scheme, and owners have done nothing. And at the end of the day, their value has been destroyed completely because they have not stepped in. So owners need to take responsibility. I mean, I think I say it a lot, and Zerlinda say it a lot on those groups, that owners need to do what owners need to do to actually make sure that trustees tread the line and follow the rules in terms of the Act, and the instructions given to managing agents are proper and legal.
Billy, on that note, one of the members of today said, how will the owners know? And I think that's the importance of transparency. And very often the members only know what's going on at the annual general meeting when they take a look at the annual financial statements to see what actually happened during the course of the year, or the trustees report. And although managing agents act on the instructions of trustees, I believe that if the managing agent is aware and can have evidence to that effect that there is mismanagement happening in the body corporate, the managing agent should be notifying the owner. Of course, they do run the risk of then being terminated by the trustees, because a management agreement can be terminated by trustee resolution, but at least then they know that they've done the right thing, and where one door closes, another one opens, and where you lose business from one scheme that is not functioning correctly, you are going to gain business from a scheme that is. That's at least my, what you put out there, you get backed up of view on the world.
Absolutely. Something that we can also maybe learn from an executive managing agent is that they have to report to owners every 4 months in respect of budget, maintenance that's going to take place, how the spending has taken place, what decisions have been made. And maybe that is also something that managing agents should do in general, is report to owners every 4 months like an executive managing agent would do. And then owners know exactly what's going on in the scheme the whole time. And they don't have to wait for an AGM to actually get that information, but they get that information throughout the year.
Yeah.
But we will definitely have to do a follow-up. I mean, I'm not even halfway through what we wanted to discuss, but it was a very interesting discussion, and I hope that everybody learned from this. And yeah, join us with our trustees training that's going to follow soon with Zerlinda and myself and Karen. And we really hope that we can actually give something back to community schemes in general.
I know we will, Billy, definitely. Billy, thank you so much for your time today. I'm sorry that we've run out of time. I think we were also very adventurous with what we wanted to talk about. It's a huge topic. There's definitely scope for a follow-up, and there's been a lot of requests for a follow-up. We've got our birthday webinar happening in June, but perhaps we can look at doing a follow-up either maybe in July, if people can wait that long. Otherwise, I'll see if I can twist the rubber arms of my colleagues and see if we can have a further one this month. But Nicole's probably going to kick me under the table if I say
alternatively that. I need to then get Daniela to change the subject of our webinar, and then we bring you on board, and we can use our slot and we can follow on this.
I'm on board with that if Daniela is willing to
absolutely
to change your topic. Adding another webinar at this stage of the month is going to be a little bit hectic from our side.
Oh, we can do it. We can do it. I always have these ideas, and then Nicole threatens to fire me, so I need to start.
Yeah.
All right, ladies and gents, thank you so much for joining us. Remember, the recording is going to be made available on our website. We have shared Stratafin's information in the chat function before. You all know Willie and Daniela. We've also shared the links to those Facebook groups: Sectional Title Living in SA, Portfolio Manager Support Group only for managing agents. And then I've shared a link to the Bloberg Sectional Title Group for those of you that live in the area in Cape Town. Otherwise, thank you again for joining us. I really appreciate your time today. Please do check out our website for all the other webinars that we've co-hosted with Stratafin, with Willie, and with Daniela. And Willie, Daniela, thank you again for your time, and thank you for always involving us in the industry as well. It's really appreciated. We really do enjoy working with you, and we think that we're like-minded individuals, and that is to the betterment of the industry as a whole. On that note, ladies and gents, have a fantastic day further and a good weekend. And we'll see you all again soon. Keep well. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.